Devo mahasa agus bhur géad fáilte a gcuine uisle go Páirc an Croke Nocht an ócáid speisialta agus starúil seo. On this day 100 years ago, the history of Ireland, of the GAA and of Croke Park were changed forever following an attack by Crown forces on the crowd at a football match between Dublin and Tipperary during the War of Independence and resulting in the loss of 14 innocent lives. To help us remember this tragedy and to remember those who died, we are honoured to be joined by Brendan Gleeson, who will deliver a narration written by the author, Michael Foley.
At 3:15 p.m. on Sunday, November the 21st, 1920, the sun shone over Croke Park, warming the crowd of 15,000 gathered to watch Tipperary play Dublin in a game of football, a rare and precious thing in a time of war. Talk had rumbled through the city all morning, all the way into the dressing rooms that afternoon, about attacks by the IRA on men in their beds believed to be spies. But Michael Hogan from Grangemoakler, County Tipperary, was thinking only of Frank Burke, the dancing, dazzling Dublin forward he was sentenced to mark. He asked his fellow defender, Bill Ryan, to swap, but he couldn't. Bill had lost his boots in a fight with some soldiers on the train up from Tipperary the previous day, and these new ones were loose. Michael Hogan returned to his bag and found a lace for Bill to tighten his boots. A simple act of kindness from one teammate to another, and a memory Bill would cherish for the rest of his life. By 3:25 p.m, Michael Hogan was on the ground beside Frank Burke. Bullets were sparking off the walls of Croke Park. The pitch was being shredded by gunshots. Police were pouring into the ground. People were falling all around them, shot, trampled, crushed. In 90 seconds, 14 people lay dead and mortally wounded on the field and banks of Croke Park and on the streets outside. Tonight, 100 years on, we pause to remember them all, the 14 who went to a match and never came home. 1. Jane Boyle from Lennox Street in Dublin came to the game with her fiancé, Daniel Byron. They stood together near the halfway line on the Cusack stand side. When the firing started, they ran towards the exit near modern-day Hill 16. I heard the sound of shots coming from the direction of the bridge outside the ground, Daniel said. My fiancé, who had hold of my arm, was shot dead. Daniel was swept away by the crowd. Jane was buried in her wedding dress the following week. 2. James Burke lived in Windy Arbour on the south side of Dublin. He was a van driver with the Terranure Laundries, the father of 6 children. As the firing intensified, a crush developed at that Hill 16 exit. James was lost beneath the crowd. He was 44 years of age. 3. Outside on Russell Street, Daniel Carroll from Templederry, County Tipperary, was hurrying away from Croke Park when a shot from a police lorry struck him in the leg. He lay in hospital the following day, talking to Martin Kennedy, the owner of the bar in Drumcondra where Daniel worked. Wasn't it misfortunate I went, he said. Daniel died on Tuesday. He was 31. 4. For 4 days after the killings, the newspapers charted the mystery of the man lying in Jervis Street Hospital, unknown and unclaimed. One man, middle-aged and sandy-haired, they said, of the labouring class, dark brown hair turning grey, long sandy moustache, believed to be an ex-soldier wearing an army undershirt and boots. Michael Foley, a veteran of World War I, lived at Gardner Place, barely a few minutes' walk from Croke Park. His body was finally claimed that Thursday. He was buried in a grave left unmarked for nearly 100 years. 5. As Michael Hogan crawled across the ground beside Frank Burke, he shouted to the other players nearby, "We'll lie in here close, we might get some protection." Then Frank Burke heard Michael again above the rattle of gunfire. "I'm shot," Hogan said. He died on the field, forever tied now to Croke Park, immortalised by the stand that bears his name. He was 24. Number 6. As 19-year-old Tom Hogan from Tankerstown, County Limerick, lay in hospital suffering a bullet wound to his shoulder, he recognised a nurse he knew from home. She wrote to the family. Tom, she said, was very poorly. He asked for me after coming to himself on Sunday night. Times are awful. The following Friday, Tom Hogan became the last victim to die. 7. When the firing started, James Matthews from North Cumberland Street and his friend climbed a wall to escape the ground near where I'm standing now. James's friend got away. James was shot in the leg. His wife, Kate, sat at his funeral with their 2 daughters. Their 3rd daughter, Nancy, was born the following spring. Nearly a century later, when a headstone was unveiled in his memory, Nancy was there to remember her dad. 8. When the shooting was at its fiercest, 57-year-old Patrick O'Dowd from Buckingham Street climbed the 7-foot-high wall that ran along the bank where the Cusack stand is now, extended his arm and began pulling people to safety until he was shot. We'll never know how many people Patrick saved before he was killed. 9. 10-year-old Jerome O'Leary from Blessington Street was sitting on the wall behind the canal end goal. When the first police trucks rolled into the canal bridge outside, he turned to look back. 2 shots rang out. One of them knocked Jerome from the wall. He was the youngest victim that day. Number 10. A little way up from Jerome, 11-year-old William Robinson from Little Britain Street was sitting in a tree at the corner of the modern-day Hogan and Davin stands, watching the game from the best seat in the house. He also turned when he heard the trucks. The first shot knocked William from the tree. A man picked him up. "Will you tell my dad I'm hurt?" William asked him. He died 2 days later. 11. As Michael Hogan lay bleeding on the field, Tom Ryan from Glenbryan, County Wexford, ducked through the gunfire to reach him and whispered an act of contrition in the dying man's ear. In that instant, Tom was shot in the back, the bullet bursting through his belt. He died that night in hospital, aged 27. Number 12. When the firing was over, 14-year-old John William Scott from Fitzroy Avenue, across the road from Croke Park, lay dying on a kitchen table in a house outside the ground, shot through the chest. When his father visited the house looking for his son, his body had already been taken away. He sought proof that this grief was truly his to bear. The owner of the house pressed into his hand his son's tie pin and glasses. Number 13, James Tehan from Gurteen, County Tipperary, had left the bar he ran with his brother on Green Street in the heart of the city that afternoon, bound for Croke Park. When the firing began, he was swept up in the crush at the exit near modern-day Hill 16. His body was returned home to Tipperary and buried in a quiet graveyard surrounded by trees and a soft-running stream, away from the chaos that claimed his life. 14. As police fired on clusters of spectators trying to escape, Joseph Traynor from Ballymount on the outskirts of Dublin City was climbing the wall running along the bank of the canal goal when he was shot twice in the back. When the firing stopped, local people left their homes to help the wounded. Joseph was cared for at the home of the Ring family until an ambulance carried him away. News of his death reached Ballymount at 9 p.m. that night. He was 20. Tonight we remember each victim and honour the grief carried by their families down through the decades. We hold the memory of their loved ones close, giving them life again through the sharing of their stories. They come alive again in the stadium, in the 10-year-old child thrilled by the prospect of a day in Croke Park, in the couple in love at a football game, holding hands, lost in the game and each other. They live again in young people making their trip to Croke Park part of one long weekend adventure. They live through older ones, going to the matches, following the tradition handed down to them, O Gluin go Gluin. They are our family, our friends, our people. Cuine mi sharha ilik. We remember them all.
Farmid Fáilte Initiative, Uachtarán na Héireann, Micheál O'Higgins, an Taoiseach Micheál Martin, Catherine Martin, Ara Trasóireachta, Cultúr, na Halaíon, Gaeltacht, Sport agus na Meán, who will lay a wreath on behalf of the people of Ireland. They are accompanied by Uachtarán and Art Stewart, Cumann Luke Glas Gael, Sean O'Horáin, agus Tomás O'Rian, who will lay a wreath on behalf of the GAA membership and the Croke Park staff in memory of those who passed away. The wreaths are dedicated to all 14 lives lost in the tragedy and are placed on the spot where Tipperary player Michael Hogan was shot. Representing Dublin is Alan Brogan, three-time All-Ireland winner, and representing Tipperary, two-time All-Star Declan Brown. The national tricolour is carried by Rachel Dobbs and the GAA flag by Michael Joyce, both members of the Artane School of Music. The President and Taoiseach will now take up their positions for the wreath laying.
Well, it's a very powerful and very moving sight to see that corner of Croke Park lit up so beautifully by those 14 flames and the 14 beams of light that are spraying out over the field, filling up the darkness after a beautiful ceremony. And now the wreath laying by the President of Ireland, the Taoiseach of Ireland, the Ard Stúrthóir of the GAA and the President of the GAA.
An Uachtarán, Flas Galagan, Har Ceann, Bhuintir na Héireann, in an Ori Dói Siúd, ar four boss on Sho, an Lá Sho, Emilia Negade is a fihan. I now invite the President to lay a wreath on behalf of the people of Ireland in honour of those who lost their lives here on this day, 1920.
Michael Foley, as I mentioned at the top, it's a real privilege to be watching this and these moments with you after all the work you've done, as Pat and Kieran and Joanne pointed out beforehand, in helping us understand what happened this day 100 years ago. And it's the culmination of a journey for you, but a journey alongside all the families involved who can't be here today.
Absolutely, Darren. That's my primary thought right now. I suppose tonight, in a lot of ways, is about connectedness and the fact that there's so many people can't be here, and the people who are on my mind are the families of the victims. I mean, okay, some people like me helped to bring the story forward in the last bunch of years, but these are the people that curated and looked after and cherished these people and their memories for so long, until we were almost ready to hear these stories. And in that sense, it's such a shame that they can't be here, but obviously, look, we've all had to make sacrifices this year, and that connectedness, I just hope that they're watching at home and they can feel the emotion that we're feeling here, and that they know that we're with them. The whole country is with them tonight. You can see it from the reaction of people over the past week in terms of how they've engaged with this story and connected, that I hope that the families of the victims realise that we're with them right now.
And hearing all 14 of the names read out, of course, Michael Hogan rings very loud around here, and looking at that corner of the ground, I think we'll always perhaps look at it in a different way now. You did for many years, having known the story so well, but, you know, a 10-year-old lad from Blessington Street.
That is the wreath-laying ceremony.
That's the conclusion of the wreath-laying ceremony.
We'll move to the side of the pitch now to view the performance.
And now we're going to have a beautiful piece of music. We'll come back to Michael presently, but we're going to hear a beautiful piece called More Than a Game, which is composed and performed by Colin McAnivra, accompanied by the singer Lisa Hannigan. And if you've watched some of the beautiful videos that the GAA have produced in order to commemorate Bloody Sunday, and in order to commemorate and remember the lives of the 14 people who were lost here that day, you'll be well familiar with this beautiful piece of music.
We will now play a specially commissioned video tribute created by the GAA as part of the centenary commemoration, and to remember those who tragically went to a match 100 years ago and never went home. The music is a special piece entitled More Than a Game, commissioned by the GAA and performed by the renowned Colin McAnivra, accompanied by singer Lisa Hannigan and Catherine Fitzgerald on piano and keyboard. Colm is a well-known musician and composer and a founding member of bands such as The Frames and Keela. His grandfather, Harry O'Carroll, was a member of the 4th Battalion, Dublin Brigade Old IRA, and was an active medical orderly on the morning of Bloody Sunday in 1920. He had a ticket for the game, but did not attend. This concludes our ceremony to remember the lost lives of Bloody Sunday at Croke Park 1920, an event which forever ties the GAA to this pitch. Though we gather at Croke Park to celebrate our great games and our great players who performed them, we do so in the knowledge that there is a history and a heritage that we must respect. We pledge ourselves to ensure that the terrible events of that sunny November afternoon are never erased from our memory, and most importantly, that the people who were killed that day are never forgotten. Cuinimish orhu illig. We remember them all. Garamachaguz.
Michael Foley, you've been so close to this for so long. It's been so close to your heart. What's your feeling this evening, having witnessed that beautiful remembrance ceremony of those 14 people?
Well, first of all, it's an absolute privilege to be here. It's an honour to be here when so many people are looking in, and we're here to be able to bring it to them. And I suppose my final thought on it is that, you know, all the storytelling, all the information, everything we've tried to do is to bring these people back to this story, to the centre of this story. And if the legacy of this is that when Bloody Sunday and Croke Park is spoken of again, that the victims will be at the centre of the story. And if we've done that, I think we've done something good. And I hope that, you know, the families, it means something to the families as much as it means to the rest of us.
It certainly does. Michael, thank you very much for being here. We'll take a break.
They're heading down to the spot where we believe Michael Hogan was killed on Bloody Sunday 100 years ago to lay a wreath. So really lovely gesture from the Dublin footballers, because as we all know, it was Dublin whom Tipperary were playing that day. Lots talked about Tipperary, and they'll obviously be wearing the same jerseys that Michael Hogan and the Tipperary team wore on Bloody Sunday back in 1920. Dublin also wearing specially commissioned jerseys as well. They've got the 14 written on, as you can see there, on their sleeves, and each names of the victims from Bloody Sunday are inside that 14 as well. So a lovely touch here from Stephen Cluxton and from the Dublin footballers as well.
We talk about Dublin as a football team, but what we don't often talk about, and which doesn't get highlighted enough, is Dublin as individuals, as people. These are wonderful role models for the association, wonderful role models for the young of Ireland. They're a credit to their county, they're a credit to their families, and they're a credit to the GAA, and we should be very, very proud of them. And this is a lovely, poignant moment.
And particularly to come in, it must have been an emotional night for them. Not that you could tell from the way, almost like professionals, they turned up, they came out.
Joanne, we were here before the game, and it was an extremely emotional. It was a fantastic commemoration, very, very touching. And I suppose the players were in the dressing room and they were preparing for a match, and they probably missed that moment. And obviously, this was something that was planned out to recognise the loss, I suppose, 100 years ago. And as you said, Dublin were involved that day, so it's a lovely touch by the players.
Yeah, so there you go. You can see all of them there lining up, getting ready to lay down the wreath. We'll see more, of course, tomorrow when at Páirc Uí Chaoimh we've got Tipperary taking on Cork. So Stephen Cluxton brings the wreath over to the area where Michael Hogan was shot 100 years ago today. More on the 2020 Leinster football final on a hugely significant evening for the GAA coming up next.